Okay, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Dirk Cobry.
Dana Brunson.
And we are doing the talk that you voted for, which was titled Community Engagement, Collaborating with Other Facilitators, with Developers, with Researchers, with Stakeholders, with Administration, and Being Aware of the different target groups and their different angles. So,
what does that mean?
We volunteered to do this talk, and our first step was to try to figure out what the heck that meant. And we thought, hey, why don't we ask you what that meant? All right, so keep putting your answers up there. But when we talked about it, Dana and I got discussing. And one thing we both kind of do is I have a standard talk that I give to kind of say what is research computing and why people should care. And we thought we'd share that with you.
Yeah, I have a similar type of talk, but it's the Dana version. And so we're giving meta talks.
Yeah, meta talks. And these are talks that, so I'll just show you that the last time I gave this talk was actually not that long ago. Let's see, there it is. And you can tell it was at a site with VGA only based on the aspect ratio.
That's a good one.
And so my standard title of my talk is Do More Faster. That's my selling title. Utilizing advanced conceptual research. This was given at a conference about forming research teams. So I added the words in your research team so that it would be appropriate for the conference. See, that's what I did there. And, you know, I talk about myself. You guys don't care. Talk about the cyber ambassadors. You guys don't care. But this is my House of Science part. And so I try to bring in people thinking about what it is to be a scientist. And I give a little bit of history, and I try to relate to everybody in the room, talking to them like they're 12, right? And so we call this the House of Science. It all started with the thinking person, right? They're just people that had lots of money and didn't have to work in the fields and could sit around and actually think. And they came up with the scientific method. You know, you've got your theories. What theories do you have? And what do? You do experimentation, forming the pillars of all the scientific knowledge. Well, what we did as scientists, and I had nothing to do with it, I was not even thought of yet, but once we had theory, we invented tools to help us explore our science. So one of the first tools was math, and we would develop scientific models and represent them as mathematical equations and solve them on these old screens here were called chalkboards. And they would solve those, but then very quickly those models got out of hand. And we would have to do simulations. This is in the late or mid-60s, I think, is when we got this machine at Michigan State University. And that was one of our first computers. It was called Mystic. I love this one because the memory, you couldn't go to Radio Shack or anything to buy equipment. And so they actually had to wrap wire around magnets to make the memory. And they had undergrads do that. Because why? Undergrads. But now, even this old computer, now we can get to really big simulations. So this is done by one of our researchers named Brian O'Shea. And it's old. He doesn't like this video anymore, but I just think it's cool. They simulate the formation of the universe. That's pretty big, right? And so this particular part of the simulation is showing galaxies colliding with each other. And it so happens that the galaxy represented here in the middle forms a spiral shape. So this is a simulation of how a spiral galaxy might be formed. And if you don't know, our galaxy is a spiral galaxy. And so this is a simulation of how our type of galaxy may have formed, which is just freaking cool. But there's another pillar over here of science, right? You started with experiments. You went into observations. Scientists used to hire artists to follow them around, and when they would observe something, they would draw pictures of the natural world so that they would have a record of what things looked like. And as technology advanced, we could actually use technology to answer scientific questions. So an ongoing scientific question used to be, do all four legs of a horse leave the ground when it gallops? Most people in the scientific community, like 95%, said, of course they do. But there was always those holdouts, those flat footers. I don't know if that's what they're called, but they should have been. who believed that there's always one foot on the ground. And it wasn't until this experiment where, I forget the researcher's name, who actually used a high-speed camera, multiple cameras, to actually manage to take a picture of a horse with all 4 of its feet leaving the ground, settling that question once and for all. Because back then they used to believe data. Sorry. And now we get all kinds of data. This is our data deluge, right? It's not just data and observation, it's massive amounts of data. And what's interesting about the simulations and the massive amounts of data is they both take computation, right? And so people have often talked about the third pillar of science. How many people have heard third pillar of science? That's where we are, right? And that's what, it's important, so we call it the third pillar. I think that's wrong. We are not the third pillar of science. We're actually the foundation of all modern science. Much better than a pillar. All right? And this is the argument I make to people and why, and it just so happens I was selling Michigan State at this moment. So that's why our university is the best and all these other things are really great too. So this is an example of a very quick, and you all knew this, but is a way to engage any audience. I have given this to kids, I've given this talk to other scientists, it doesn't matter, but it gives everybody a common ground so that when we talk about computing, I can honestly say, look, you look at any cutting edge research in any field, they're using computing. Now some of them may only have reached the desktop, but they're thinking about going bigger than that, right? Data and simulation is just exploding. And so that's the hook that I try to bring them in with. And then usually, you know, I talk about what types of things happen on a computer. And then I sometimes give this little talk on how you build a computer, you know, starting from the cores on the way up. I'm happy to share this. I also talk about data centers and pods, Facebook, Google, and the cloud. But the whole point of these types of talks is to get people around this idea that computers in the cloud are just computers and that there are clouds for research. I'm using Exceed and there's lots of resources and this is my motivational talk. Happy to share slides, but I recommend you come up with your own motivational talk that isn't about so much technical things, but just understanding where we live as a group in the context of research. All right, you wanna? Any questions about that? Actually, we had no idea. Was that actually useful? Well, some of you said so. Suck up.
Check the poll real quick.
Check the poll real quick. That would be this one.
Fill it in.
All right, I know my keystrokes.
Okay, so obviously Dirk and I talked just a wee bit about all of this, but not a whole bunch. I went ahead and changed my title to not my usual one that has like, I don't know, 40 or 50 extra syllables. Whoa, and it's gonna do that. Hold on. How do you make it? Oh, your
Arrow keys?
arrow keys, but it's going by itself.
I don't know how to stop that.
I can't even find the mouse.
Didn't I help you with this last time?
Yeah. Dirk, where's your mouse? It's gone.
It's on the other screen.
Oh, it's
on
the
the
top.
other
That's
screen.
over it.
Here, we'll just escape.
It's there.
No, it automatically goes to 2, even if it's in mirroring mode because it's PowerPoint. So slideshow, what do we have to do?
Full. Oh yeah, use timings, turn off all that crap.
It's very slow.
Let's run in Zoom too.
Oh.
Okay, well there's still, it says seconds running, but it's not gonna do stuff, right?
That's just giving you a time of how long you've been talking.
Okay. Wow, just 11 seconds. Anyway, so when I moved to Internet 2, I kind of had to start a whole new talk, right? Because I couldn't tell my typical talk at various places was motivating, and a lot of the stuff I was doing was going and talking to kind of people in our communities who are struggling at their institutions or institutions with emerging cyber infrastructure that needed to know how to, you know, justify the existence, the value, and convince stakeholders and all of this. And since then, I've discovered it doesn't matter if you're like, you know, the top university, well, not the top one, but like the 10th top university or the 200th university, or even like the Office of Cyber Infrastructure at NSF. Also, everybody in this arena, networking, computing, data, they all have to figure out how to do all the things they think are the right thing to do for the researchers they serve. So no matter how big your problems are, we share them. And so this talk is kind of to give this new one I worked on as one. I was experiencing a lot of fun with the technology. So I wanted to kind of step back a little bit and ask, you know, be my own devil's advocate. Like, who cares? Why are we here? And so I start with kind of this stuff is my bold claim is that, and this is gonna echo everything Dirk said, but kind of not with the pretty pictures. That it's everything's increasingly reliant on cyber infrastructure. Now, granted, so I'm using the word cyber infrastructure here. You might want to be careful of that depending on your audience. Everybody here knows what I mean by that. In some circumstances, you might want to just say research computing or research IT even, or one of these other things, and someday we'll figure it out, but we haven't yet. It's complex and it's changing all the time. And that the people part is really important. So I almost intentionally leave out mention of hardware a lot on purpose, even though it's really important, because once people see it, that's all they think about. And then credit all the slides that I've stolen from everyone. And so first I start with just like the science, right? So I'm going to make you completely bored of how much science happens. And again, it's kind of science specific, and I try also to talk more broadly research and then also scholarly activity, because the people in the non-STEM fields think that when you say research, you mean STEM. And so, you know, trying to get words, even though, you know, if you're talking, you have to, it's that context switching that you have to do, and that we all have to do because we're in the middle of many conversations. So this is just to point out, you know, look at all this stuff, large scale, small scale. We need to be able to reuse this. A lot of what I'm doing is often trying to articulate what needs to happen with some National Science Foundation workshops, because the cyber infrastructure funding is kind of like, it feels like they're, you know, they throw out all this this money for projects like seeds in a wildflower garden, and then some of them grow up, but then that sustainability question comes up a lot. And so we see projects go up and go down, or the other one I've heard is playing whack-a-mole with infrastructure. So then I'm going to bore you with yet more science. Here's the big data part of it. You know, we have all this data, and this is the part that really got me interested in infiltrating the networking community, because when I was at Oklahoma State, I struggled mightily to understand enough networking to help our researchers use the network to move the data. And so that's how I started hanging out with James and Wallace and all that. And then since I do work at Internet too, I had to put this slide in. So we have, what is this, 1.8 exabytes of data passed over the network in the last year. And the slope, right? So this is serious. And this is also to point out that we need a lot more people, right? Every chart we've seen this entire week looks like this. And then NSF again, the big idea is every single one of these depends on cyber infrastructure. I'm gonna get through this too. And this is where I kind of get, so I've gotten, you know, coming from research computing, and then we started getting storage and networking, and now we have, you know, the giant hero projects that will win Nobel Prizes, and so you can get funding for their cyber infrastructure any day of the week. And they often have their own research computing people on those projects. And a lot of the stuff that gets developed for those hopefully then becomes available for the masses. And then on this end, we have all of the very edge products, right? And so this gets so much more complicated because it's zillions of things and they're most often very different. And this is where a lot of the hard part is, because these projects are often small and can't afford to have their own cyber infrastructure person. And so there's a lot of work we as a community can do in this space to develop or to help support and spread the word on kind of common use things so that there's reuse and more people can use the same thing, right? And then we talk a lot about the ecosystem. So this is a slide I stole from Alan Blatecki when he was at NSF. And we're working on better pictures, but the thing to remember here is that each one of those ovals is huge, has lots of things in it. But then this is one of my favorite pictures on what happens when you have all these things working together. You know, it's not, we've talked a lot about actual code and optimization and HPC and stuff, which are in this picture, but you know, LIGO, the gravitational wave discovery. Look at all the cyber infrastructure components that had to come together to make that work. And I think what I want people to take away from this picture is these are kind of isolated groups. You know, there's overlaps, but the key to everything we do in this community are those people. I learned this word from a social scientist just a month ago, the boundary spanners, right? The people that sit and know, and it's come up in various contexts and different languages here, you know, the barber, right? And the people who know what's going on in at least 2 communities or organizations and can be the person that is the conduit for those collaborations. And the thing we don't do in this community is kind of make that a real job. Like that's often like you do that, but you feel like you're not working when you do that. That's work, and it's vitally important work. So yay, boundary spanners. And that's that part. So this is short. I cut out, I already told you about champions and CARC, and I didn't tell you about some other things, but this is what I just added these couple of slides for my last couple of talks, so I'm still workshopping them. But this is basically, this is where I say, my entire talk is really just a plug for a blog post by Dan Reed. Dan Reed, who's provost at University of Utah, but he's had vice president for research, and he was at Henry. He was at NCSA.
He was at NCSA, University of Illinois.
Oh, I haven't.
He's been at University of Iowa, University of Utah. Right. He founded the Renaissance Computing Institute, RENCI. He was at Microsoft Research for several years. He's been around.
Yeah, so he's every time I started thinking about giving talks, and I'm like, who do I love listening to talk? And Dan Reed popped into my head, and since I've heard him talk, I started reading his blog, and he has this great one, reifying the school at Athens. So then I Googled the word reifying. But basically, you know, you've all heard of like the Renaissance man, or nowadays the Renaissance individual. And there was this person who was basically, you know, near expert level in absolutely everything, right? You know, I like to call us Renaissance geeks because that sounds cooler. But today, information, there's too much, right? We heard earlier, you know, about how in academia, everybody's getting more and more specified in their learnings. And, you know, you get 2 people even in the same department studying different fields can barely talk the same language. And we're like coming back against that and becoming more of this Renaissance individual. But we can no longer do it alone. We need to have a team. And so, let me see if I remember it all. So the challenges to this are our structures, and pretty much every organization, and especially in academia, do not reward multidisciplinary work. In fact, it's often punished. And then this is the nice way of saying get out of the weeds, right? So we do this a lot, and the groups I've been working with CARC and all this on professionalization, I've learned so much working with a social scientist who's been facilitating conversations and starting to learn the tricks about how to gently keep all our thoughts on this level rather than discussing the intricacies of whether Emacs or BI are better. So let's see, all right. And then last bit is the things he wrote in the blog that he thought were really important to do this, and that we should all try to embody these traits. Willingness to share, so check, I think we all do that pretty well. Humility and willingness to learn. I think this one's actually harder for me, right? Because I think I know so much. But to remember to listen, especially when people don't sound like you, or are in a different field than you, or heaven forbid, they're not technical. But they often have really important things to say that if you can get past the defensiveness of when somebody says something you think is weird, and just try to see their viewpoint. And then the third one, being aspirational. So many people, we've been struggling for so long to accomplish what we might, that we start to think it can't happen. And to remember, it is changing and dynamic. And so that the only thing, that it for sure won't happen if we don't try, right? Okay, sacrifice, we should probably not do so much of that, because I have a feeling this community does a lot of that already. And listening, hearing all the other voices. And that's pretty much it. That's how I end. Dreamers stand me. That's all right. So now those were some samples. We want to do another question.
Yeah, let's do another question.
You drive.
Okay, great. You talk.
I talk. Which question are we going to do first?
I don't know.
Who's the stakeholders? Are there any just comments or questions at the moment?
Is this the one you were thinking?
Okay, so we kind of covered stakeholders, that kind of the big YCI in general should even be a thing. So the rest of this is going to be interactive, so pay attention.
So this is like a brainstorming session. Who are our stakeholders? Who do we want to talk to? Who do we need to engage? You can yell them out too. The research community.
Institutional officers.
Institutional officers. We need someone typing these in.
Funding agencies.
Funding agencies.
We want word clouds or lists?
I like it. Although if you're going to put a space, put an underline next to it, and then it will come out right. What other people do we need to engage? Groups.
Research groups.
Research groups for sure.
IT staff.
IT staff. Enterprise. We got to pilch their people, all the ones that can communicate, and bring them over to our side.
National scale resource providers.
Funding agencies, national, what did you say, Henry?
National scale resource providers.
National scale resource providers. I'm trying to repeat so that it gets in the mic. What other things? Let's think outside the box. We've done a lot of academic. What other things?
Government.
Government agencies. National labs. Local communities.
Community college.
Community colleges. Why not?
Legislatures.
Legislatures. International community. We don't care about this.
I'm coming anyway.
Did I hear CERN? K-12. Yeah, let's start educating them early.
Yeah.
My kids are in trouble. Oh, this is our best class so far. So you keep coming up with ideas, keep thinking about this. Given these agencies, what are we doing? Actually, we have another question for this. What are you doing to engage these groups? All right, so give a few more seconds to come up with a few more. But now I want you to think about your own, on your own campus as a research facilitator in whatever role you are, how are you engaging communities? You see my standard talk that I will give to anyone who listens and force it down their throat. I go to classrooms, I go to random conferences I've never been to before just to give the talk, right? I'm always plugging Campus Champions and everybody else trying to get awareness out there. What are you doing? I like to hear myself talk. So hold on, let's start the next one. Did you start it? No. Okay. For okay, this one will, I think, keep going, right? I don't know how this works.
No, you only have one active at a time.
Yeah.
This is the one I was thinking about. Yeah. How do you engage your stakeholders? Oh, I didn't activate it?
Oh, maybe.
Depends on the targets.
Yeah, no, but how are you doing? Like, what a community and how are you activating them?
Participate in the events.
What?
Participate in the events. Like public events.
Oh, going to public events.
Yeah, doing also summer camps, for example.
Oh, summer camps for kids. That's cool. What other things?
Sell it to the grad students. I mean, it's easy.
Target the grad students, absolutely. Especially if you're trying to get users.
Yeah, I personally target the undergrads. Or, I mean,
Yeah. By the time they get in.
In particular, the people who are, they know they're interested in either computing or science, but they don't know exactly what they want to do.
So how do you target the undergrads?
Well, for me personally, I run a Linux user group.
So a Linux student is a group, like a student club.
Yes.
Excellent.
Let me ask you a question. Why are you waiting so late? Target the K-12 community. Start working with your STEM advocates in the K-12 community and get them early.
There's a conversation going on in general that a lot of conventional math and maybe some science courses should be replaced or at least enhanced with data literacy, which I think will lead to this, segue into this very well.
So
Never mind data, let's go for numerical literacy.
Numeracy.
right, so I changed, at our university, we had a matrix algebra course. I revamped it completely. Now it's called numerical linear algebra, and it's all about how I use computers to teach algebra. So that's an example of something I do. What do you do?
Sending emails.
You send emails.
Also, regular meetings.
Who do you send emails to?
I have undergrad group, grad group, all the grad students.
You blast it out there.
Blast it out.
Excellent. What else do you do?
We started early towards the HPC guys on our cluster. We have them on a mailing list and we email them about workshops that we have. So if they are on R and they want to explore Python or they want to explore Linux or how to better use the cluster, then we have them come into the workshop. And then we try to give them examples or have some kind of structure based on the carpentries workshop, kind of engage them in different activities.
So you have workshops and then you engage your existing community to expand it.
From where they are.
Yeah, excellent.
We used to do Raspberry Pi clusters in middle schools.
Ooh, Raspberry Pi clusters in middle schools. That could be
Ooh, I
fun.
once took a Raspberry Pi cluster to a preschool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. There's a program in Albuquerque at one of the lowest income schools where they're teaching Python at the 3rd grade level.
Yeah, Python at the 3rd grade level. I actually worked with my old advisor. He would go into schools and he taught computational thinking without computers because he would be going into low income schools and they didn't always have computers. And so we had these really cool activities where we played magic games and stuff, talking about binary and talking about how computers works and how to program, and we would do sorting, and it was a lot of fun. If anybody wants it, I can give it to you, but it's all without a computer, and that was pretty fun.
So to that point, if you check out your psychology department in your university, sometimes they have outreach teaching programs with middle school and elementary schools in your region. And I know of one particular computing lab that used that to try and teach programming through fun activities like dancing or something. So you could hook up with.
So that's a good, so there's a tip. Connecting people with you said psychology group that might have an outreach program. A lot of campuses do have outreach programs. So looking for your outreach program. And I'm just going to say that gives you two things. Yes, you're going to foster those young kids. It's going to take them a while to that to pay off. But you can also brag about in your grants that you've been doing that, and that's a more immediate payoff. Jen?
NC State works with virtual and natural sciences. When they have real scientists talk, that really excites the kids, and then the kids can help the scientists.
Yeah, so engage your museums. We got this thing, a sphere, and it's supposed to be data on a sphere, and they keep asking me what I can put on it. You know, they want us to put things on it, and I can't find anything that isn't already been done a million times.
So make an announcement on the fact that it's free.
Wait, I thought that was Henry's copyright.
Actually, I did it.
Every time you use the word free, I get it.
The thing is, we did it actually.
Praise free food.
We did it actually. I think still, like I was asked to design a poster and brochures, and the first line was free. So
Did they come?
yes,
I like
it works.
You need dollars.
Say?
We did some construction in our machine, and we had to cut holes in the ties for the air conditioning air to come, but we had to cut it that night. And the guy who was doing the contractor, he was like, well, I live in Santa Fe, but if you give a tour for the kids of my son's class, so he was like 3rd or 4th grade. So if you give them a tour of the center and maybe teach them something that day, then I would do it for you that time.
Oh, so you actually got your, I'm repeating, you actually got your contractor who you needed a little extra work out of,
Exactly.
and the deal you made was you let their kids come and tour your
Yeah.
data center.
And we had them for 3 weekends, and we worked with the kids.
Wow, 3 whole weekends. Wow, that's fun. Yeah.
During summer, universities usually have summer camps with kids around, and they usually have it for high school as well. So if you want to target paper over the summer.
Oh, summer camps in high schools. Actually, oh, sorry. Someone get online and make sure I'm not missing chat room people.
Are Zoom land able to type into the poll? So I wanted to like extrapolate from what, or you gave me an idea. And that is talk to your current researchers to find out what sorts of activities they are doing, because they often have, these outreach to, and they're using their science. You could team up with them. So I did this with the chemistry faculty who did all sorts of cool stuff, and so we would work together. So the students in his outreach and the K-12 and undergrad, so that they would get the chemistry part, but then they'd see me there or my team there too, doing the cyber infrastructure part, and so they knew that we were collaborators, not just the surface. Oh, there's a computer somewhere, but you don't need to know that. We made it like a full first-class citizen of that event.
So online it says talk to researchers to find out what they're doing. I think we've said that, but actually it's one of the best things you can do. I love taking my show on the road. Anytime I can get into a department and talk to them, I engage them as much as possible.
I like that.
That's a good one. Answering every question posed from your new CIO who has a deficit in understanding the uniqueness of research computing.
So everyone here knows that I'm not the one to write that. Just to be sure.
Completely anonymous.
No matter how true, I'm not the one to write that. That's a real.
Or your VPR or whoever you're.
How many people relate with that statement? Like have had difficulty with yeah. It's a problem.
Relate. How do you explain to your CIO? I mean, how do you engage? We've talked a lot about the engagement of the researchers and the outreach to our future researchers and future colleagues. But
Well,
then,
we've had a couple of the enterprise guys here, and I think they're gone right now for the most part, but part of the problem is a lot of the new CIOs coming into the university environment now. Because of this, we're going to run the university like a business.
Yeah, running the university like a business, yeah.
We get a lot of these CIOs who come from enterprise backgrounds, And we also have this enterprise deal that we have to maintain at the university level to be able to keep all the desktops running Windows and Googling their, well, I won't say that, Googling odd things and sending spreadsheets across working. They don't, we're a blip that they don't routinely think about.
Yeah, I actually gave my talk that I just showed you to our new CIO in a small meeting for that exact reason. Yeah, who was over here?
Dan Boston.
Okay, so I was going to say a good phrase or thing to understand before talking IT is full cost recovery versus return on investment. IT organizations always talk about full cost recovery for a service.
So Dan was mentioning that IT often talks about full cost recovery, but another phrase to use is, what was this?
Your
Return on investment. Yeah, which is big.
So I have an idea actually, but I don't know if it's applied now or not, or somebody think about it. I think the good idea is to make successful or documented successful stories for researchers who use the high performance computing. That will, I think, encourage others just to use them.
Absolutely. We've been calling these love letters. You get them to send a note to your chain of command, especially someone with official decision-making authority, saying what you did for them, what effect it had on their research, and what impact that will have on their career at your institution.
Yeah, Henry mentioned his love letters previously, the idea of getting your users who love you to give you a letter, and really the boss is the lever. But I've actually been doing that as well. So when someone does something for me, I return the favor and I send out a love letter say to them and their, like their supervisor saying, thank you for doing that for me. I usually ask the person first, because if they're doing it on the side and they don't want their boss to know.
My idea is just make them publicity, like go public.
Well, we did that as well. So we hired a videographer because we had extra money, which doesn't rarely happen. And what she did is she interviewed individual faculty, and they created these short YouTube videos for the faculty.
Yeah.
They were for the faculty to use as they wanted, but they were all basically video versions of the love letters back to us. And the faculty loved it. And so we got that kind of advertisement. An institutional marketing group is a good group to engage.
So just to circle back on the CIO point,
Mm-hmm.
it helps to know that your CIO is also in charge of your enterprise IT. Sometimes information that he gets about technological advances in the field corresponds only to enterprise IT, and he may think or she may think it's applicable also to research IT. And if you know where that information is coming from, sometimes it helps you to counteract and provide circumstances or examples so to show that it will not work in your case.
So to paraphrase, you're saying that you should often preemptively maybe talk to your CIO and explain technology and how it impacts research. Where it may
enterprise IT information that is receiving with what you are doing and how it's different. It goes back to research computing different from enterprise.
Did you want to change your question?
Well, I just wanted to, we're talking about like the CIO stakeholder, but many of you have, you report to somebody else. So since we can have an anonymous place to type too, I thought, what are some issues? How do you, your boss is a stakeholder for your work, and you may have struggles in there. And so here's can we brainstorm a little bit on how you navigate with your own boss when there's, how you have that stakeholder, because you guys know what your job is. They might not even know. But what are issues around that stakeholder that come up or not? I can imagine some from my former staff.
I'll give an example, if I may. I have a story. So I had a great boss when I first came into HPC and our group, and I would tell him, I'm going to go do this thing. I'm going to join the Campus Champions, and he wouldn't know anything about it. He's like, why are you doing that? And I would say, I think it's a good guy. And he goes, I don't think that's a good use of your time, but do it if you want. He was a great boss because I could do whatever I wanted. He would give me an opinion, and then I would prove him that he was wrong later. It was great. Then I got another boss who I'd say, I want to do something, and he said, no, your job is to do X, Y, and Z. And that was a problem. And I was never good at communicating to that boss.
Yeah. Oh yeah, my boss would say, oh yeah, you can do whatever you want. You know, in the first, as long as you spend 40 hours a week doing what I want you to do. Or whatever, or different approaches, you know, like I know setting up scheduler policies where the boss has an idea of how things ought to be, but you maybe have a different idea of how things ought to be. And how do you communicate when you really do know better? Your boss about how things ought to run.
It's a delicate balancing act.
Yeah.
My experience has been that if you can provide them some information about what happens nationally and the comparison. So many years ago, my first CIO said, so have you considered the possibility of using Windows for the supercomputer? And I said, yes. And I've looked on the top 500 list of the biggest, fastest supercomputers in the world, and out of those 500, 3 are running Windows. And that was all I had to say. But if I had said, that's a terrible idea, nobody runs Windows, we would have gotten a big fight. And there's no benefit to getting a big fight with your boss. So I provided the information one time. Our then DPR said, hey, there's this $60 million cluster program this year. Shouldn't we submit a proposal to that? And I've been involved in some of these, and I knew what it was going to take. So I didn't write back and say, that's crazy, you're an idiot, although that was indeed my first instinct. I wrote back and said, yes, we could totally do that, and here's how much we would have to spend just to upgrade the data center in order to be able to write the proposal. And that was the end of that. So the wisdom that it distills down to is you never say no because, you only say yes if.
Oh yeah, have we said that this week? That was one of my favorite quotes of yours. So Henry said,
it's not mine, but I'll take credit.
well, Henry has often said, quoting someone anonymous, that don't say no because, you say yes if. Yes, if you give me tenure, a chaired seat, and I can do anything I want, I'll do almost.
I have another question when we're ready.
What? Go for it.
We talked about it, like the what keeps you up at night, what worries you.
Did you put it in here? You want
I've added it.
All right, let's switch it.
Let me see if this works.
Well, before that, like I have just a comment that is, we talked about like, you know, engaging usually like researchers and like students, staff, and everybody, but like we didn't mention how to engage actually, for example, that National Science Foundation or like, sorry, like the National Labs.
Yeah, how do you engage?
I don't know, like I don't have the idea. I would love to see, like to hear something.
All right, just to repeat your question, how do you engage things like the national labs? They're kind of separate, but we are trying to achieve the same goals. How do you engage the funding agencies? What I do to engage the funding agencies is, well, you talk to them. And there's usually program officers that are willing to talk. It's a little hard. I'm not necessarily the best at it, but that's been where my success has run. You talk to them, rock through your ideas. They won't say if they're right or wrong, but they usually can give you some great pointers.
Or talk to people who have talked to them.
Yeah.
That's usually my first step, is to do the recon, find out everything I can from people who have talked to them.
I found that when I first talked to my current program officer for the Cyber Ambassadors, I was actually at an SC, found out he was there, sent him an email and said, hey, could we talk? And that's how it happened. National labs are a little different. I mean, I have a lot of faculty on our new department that came from national labs, and they have some wonderful connections back and forth. And so we're exchanging students with the national labs over the summers and stuff like that and trying to build up a relationship. But that's very much on the academic side. I'm not sure what it would be on the computational side, because they have their own systems and stuff. We should invite them to things like this.
We did.
Perfect.
Richard Gerber, who was here the other day, wrote me and asked, he's like, oh, tell me more about these research computing facilitators. How do I hire someone? I'm telling him. Any more on the stakeholders topic?
Did you switch it?
Yeah, I switched it. So we've already got a ton of what keeps you up at night, what worries you. So it's storage, downtime, external hard drives with corrupted data, not having a sysadmin, sustainability, being the sysadmin, gangly and adios. If we're not loud enough, we will be quietly forgotten. Who wrote that? Lack of money, recurring power outages, hackers and ransomware, cybersecurity, not enough time and money to do things right, security, not enough documentation, researchers who get your cell number.
Yeah.
So,
I know you're reading that one wrong.
What keeps you up at night? I always worried that there was an email or something that I missed from some researcher, and they're just sitting there waiting to hear, yeah, upset, waiting to hear back from me, and I'm perfectly willing to help them. They just don't know it, and they're going to hate me for the rest of their life. That used to really bother me.
No, they already hate you. They just are now going to have a reason to articulate.
oh,
No one hates
you
me.
killed them.
They might dislike me
No,
greatly.
It's not you. It's your position.
Actually, I do get frustrated sometimes. You get to someone and they say, "Oh, that they don't realize you work for the HBC," and they just say, "Oh gosh, doesn't that suck?" They want a camaraderie, and I'm like, "No, I think it's awesome."
So who does feel hated by people? I mean, like your researchers. Do you feel like they are?
It depends.
So who feels like they're very appreciated by the researchers they help?
It depends.
And I'm raising my hand because I'm raising my hand. Yeah.
The ones I help, I think, appreciate me.
The problem is they have very short memory. So you have to do all of these projects one time that you're traveling. Like now, I'm here and I have two researchers just like meeting on one thing, and I cannot do it for you now. Give me a week. And they're already mad at me.
Yeah, so, and that's the problem. I feel it too, because I'm a consummate people pleaser. So like this week, they send me an email and they need something, and I'm like, okay, I won't sleep. But do you have a session on like how to like get past your people pleaserness, but still feel appreciated while you're disappointing someone?
No, we need one though. I'll make a module first.
So I remember just like I've been like disliked twice. This is what I remember. The first one was from one of the faculty.
It just became 3, but.
One of the faculty who was asked about like one of the specific software for the geographical things like GIS or whatever, and this software was like need the license and needs money to buy it. Then after that, like what I replied to them, like let me see if I can contact to them and see if it's like a version that's like like free for educational institution that we can use. Then after that, it takes me like 2 weeks or more to get reply from them. Then after that was no. Then when I said no, I don't know, she just like I got really a bad email from her that's like arguing and just like I couldn't say anything. Yeah. And there is another time, there's like another faculty actually who was asking about every single details. Like I got like more than 10 emails per day. And I didn't have the time actually to reply to that emails like just for one person. I tried to reply as much as I can. Then after that, there's some emails I missed or I've been delayed. Then I got like dislike from him.
So I know what I would do in that situation.
Please
right?
tell me.
10 emails. I usually make up a number. I wonder if I can say it.
Yeah.
What I do is when a conversation gets beyond 3 or 4, where you can tell there's a communication gap or that you're not going to be able to do it, that's when you really need a meeting. Yeah. Right?
And it's usually not hard. You can say, "I'm sorry, I've been trying to keep up, but I'm getting overwhelmed by email. Maybe this would be better talking in person."
But the thing is, sometimes meeting is not enough because like they come up with different questions. For example, when they ask for like a specific thing, I give them the answer. Then from the answer, they ask a specific thing about the answer. I answer.
That's why when a meeting is better, because it's real time. it solves a few problems, because as you're talking, you can see whether they're following or not and adjust your answer to answer all the questions at once, right? The second is text-based communication still is not very good, right? If you have a meeting, now you're human again, right? And so that changes the dynamic, and you become a partnership, and then it's working together. And just those repeated questions every single time, at least my experience, it's been way more successful. Even if it's not in person, it can be Zoom or even a phone call, because those quick back and forth are better. And even Slack is better than email.
And a meeting in a couple days at least gives you some breather.
When I first started and I was the one-person shop and I was way overwhelmed by all the questions, that's when I instituted the office hours, because that way it saved you so much time, especially students. You could get away with this, is to say, hey, come to the office hours on Wednesday, and it got them trained, and so they wouldn't pester me with every tiny little question where it was, a couple hundred emails a day versus the one they'll figure it out by Wednesday and they don't show up, which is great. And then, but when they did, it was all in one bit, and you could talk to the whole group, so everybody learned. And so there's lots of little things that work in certain situations. I ended up not having office hours after we got to a certain level of maturity in the center, just because nobody ever did show up anymore, because they either already had research groups that they'd ask, or we had enough tutorials, or all these other things. So like during the evolution of a center, the strategies change along the way.
And one of those that I think needs to be addressed, telling a researcher, I don't know. There's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know. In fact, it's important to be able to say, I don't know.
It's better to be honest about your level. I think you're hitting the point perfect.
It becomes important that they understand that you're not trying to blow smoke at them. And it's something that you probably do need to become interested in all of a sudden and try and get them an answer.
Right, you can say, I don't know, let me see if I can help you figure it out.
Yeah. And I worry for the person where that's keeping them up. We need to help them understand that.
I got one. Sometimes you'll help somebody get through something and go, all right, thanks. Now increase my wall clock. I want more RAM, and do all this stuff for me right now. And so you feel like, oh, I accomplished something right away. It's like, oh, it's not good enough.
It's not good enough.
I had that user when I was new. I talked to Henry. It's like, if you didn't have that user, you'd have to make them up.
I'm waiting, I need more.
I remember I had one who, this professor was the absolute most important person on campus. Not everyone thought that, but they did.
So every professor.
Most of Oklahoma State, I was amazed. There was a great community spirit. They're very good citizens with the few exceptions. And they would call, like, I submitted my job an hour ago and it's not done yet. So I'd like be on the phone for 20 minutes looking, and it's like, yes, it finished 5 minutes ago or whatever. Or it was, very well. So half the time the job would have finished, but she was calling anyway. The other half of the time, it was because the queue, it was very, very full. And we would, if it was urgent, we would go ahead and push people up to the front of the queue. That wasn't enough. She wanted me to kill other people's jobs.
This is sort of timely. I just got one of these sorts of user complaints, although they don't claim to be the most important in the whole world. But the compiler's not running. The compiler is hung up.
So, do you want to hear how I responded?
Please. I'm sorry. Please.
So this is I want to work on this module of how to deal with people that demand too much of you and make you feel bad.
I need to take the module, not give it. But
well, I've spent way too many brain cells formulating responses to this stuff. But on this one was just very calmly, okay, after I got over a little bit of snark, very calmly, I said, you know, these are other professors' workflows, and I'm afraid if you want me to kill their work for yours, we would have to have a meeting with the vice president for research and have a policy decision made on that. So I threw my boss under the bus. It's all, so being able, and I actually told my staff too, like, every time I hired a new person, I told them, I am always the bad guy. Let me be the bad guy, right? So if they had a researcher who was trying to take advantage of them, that they let me be the head, right? Because if they were the bad guy, if they told the researcher they can't do something, that wasn't like a clear cut, we don't do that, you know, don't share your passwords and stuff like that, but more like they want, you know, more nodes or higher allocation or whatever, you know, those kinds of things that are sort of things that would come to me anyway, to let me do. And that way, they were always the heroes, and I was the, well, I'm gonna say it in the recording. But it works out well, and I think being able, you know, that's what the boss is for, right?
You don't have a boss particularly.
Yeah, that gets into a tougher situation.
The user I got, the problem user for me today, sent me 3 emails over the course of 7 minutes, about 2 hours ago, starting with, the compiler is hung and isn't working, and this has happened before. Oh, it seems to be running now. Never mind, it all ran to completion. All over 7 minutes, a 7-minute span. Three different emails. It's like, I'm panicking because it hasn't run. Well, is it possible you're running it on the head node? Is it possible that you're not following the rules that we've already set out?
So I'm curious if anyone else had this situation. I had a faculty that was very important in his own mind, and he would badmouth us to him and to his group, but they used us quite a bit. And I would bend over backwards when his grad students showed up. They had really hard problems that weren't our fault, but I worked really hard to go. And then I would talk to this researcher, and I learned that the grad students wouldn't get work done that week. And so the weekly meeting, they learned that all they had to do if they didn't get any work done is blame the HPC. Has that happened to you? That was the worst. That was the worst. I'm like, so all it did is reinforce this faculty's opinion that we sucked. And I'm like, why am I bending over backwards at helping you guys if you're just going to throw us under the bus?
So I remember when we first started, when grad students would apply for account, I remember the day we started asking for their advisor's name and email.
Yes, everything changes when, so our team occasionally has the problem that because they don't have PhD after their name, grad students think they can ignore requests from them. So our rule is, if they don't respond within a reasonable number of days, then you resend the email with my email address visibly CC'd, and you say, Dr. Neiman, our director, has asked, whatever it was, and sorry, Dr. Neiman, our director, and then in parentheses, CC'd, has asked. And if that doesn't work, then you send the same follow-up, but with their advisor, visibly CC'd.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Passive aggressively keep
Yeah,
escalating the
that's
situation.
right. I'm not there to get them in trouble, but if they're not going to do what we need and what they are required to do, then we're going to help them decide to do the right thing.
Oh, we regularly had graduate students try to get us to do all their work for them. And so we would end up, you know, in various situations where appropriate, you know, writing back and copying the advisor, or the advisor would actually write to me and say, hey, you know, they say it takes a month for their job to run and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you know, we have data. And the advisors are always on our side. Every single time the advisor has agreed with us that their student was trying to get away with something, or, okay, you've all been there, you have a meeting with your advisor once a week, it's Tuesday, your meeting's Tuesday afternoon, so you start working, right? And you get stuck 5 minutes in, and now you're stuck, and now you have something to talk about, but you really only work 5 minutes, so who are you gonna throw under the bus? The HBC team. Yeah.
No, now that you said that, I remember what I did to resolve this is I pointed out the login. Your student has not logged in the last week. If they don't submit a job, it's not our fault.
Oh yeah, I've said that sentence. You're guaranteed your job won't start if you don't submit it. You try to be nice, but it's hard.
It is.
These are great.
How are we doing time-wise?
It's Friday.
It's 30 minutes. Do we want to switch to the?
I was going to say, one of the things which I think scrolled off, they said scheduled building moves. That keeps you up at night? I was going to say unscheduled building moves.
Yeah.
Yes.
I lost half a dozen servers in a scheduled building move.
So yeah, what do we want to talk about next?
Well, we have other topics, but if there's something that y'all want to, so here's some choices.
Maybe what communities aren't they engaging?
Well, we had the, what do you want to see next year?
Yeah, let's do that. Magic?
Let me see if it'll magic.
I have to go back.
It's active, it should be active, but it's not, you have to do something to make your screen change. Next year's workshop, or what we didn't cover. You may not want to skip next year's workshop. Like, Dirk and I are trying to think, like, we covered everything. What
else do you need?
What else do you need?
Forget you guys, I'm going home.
Or maybe you don't know what you don't know.
I like the idea of career paths.
Career paths.
Career paths, that would be interesting.
Hopefully we'll figure that out someday. That doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, I've actually had students ask me, hey, Dirk, you have the coolest job. How do I become you? And I'm like, you don't want to be. But there is no path, yeah.
So would this apply HBC and non-academia?
HBC and non-academia, like industry, yeah. We could talk more about that. I mean, I think most of us are.
How many of us have experience in it? I think we would need to.
Yeah, I don't know.
We would have to talk to people who've actually done it.
I was in Houston
Yeah.
for HPC and oil and gas. One thing mesmerized me, the crazy way they're looking for people that pay the high salary, they don't have enough.
Sure.
BP,
It's like the applications that you
Yeah.
Wait. Okay, I vote we don't talk about that because we need people too.
Yeah.
Okay, so they like the HBC in industry. That would be interesting.
Why career paths? Tell me.
What are you going to do? We have graduate students here who are trying to sort out what career path am I going to go into? And it's not a well-defined system at this point. Are you good? You apply to enterprise IT and say, I want to be your HPC ambassador.
Right.
And they look at you and go, what? That's going to be something we're going to have to help identify that. And then we're going to have to spread the gospel of that to the campus.
I think this is something Clark's been working on, right?
I know it's like you love your systems and you want to work on these systems, but then you want to deal with people, and that's one. And then you want to go like more like ambassadors and dealing with more like the administration of the school and all of this, and becomes which one do I pick? And can I go back? Like let's say I switched from technical to more like people facing. Am I passing? Am I missing time on the technology? And if I try to go back, did I lose a lot that I cannot even make it? Or like it gets still confusing?
You're giving me anxiety.
I was going to say, for institutions that don't have research facilitators, how to convince them that they do.
It's hard, yeah.
So this is, you're all like making me feel good because these are kind of the main activities of CART which is open to helping people. So go ahead and then I'll make another.
So just to add on to to the career paths options, a lot of people sometimes think about career paths vertically in a hierarchy, but sometimes we might want to consider laterally as well. So if we are in research computing, maybe if you can switch to either enterprise IT or some other kind of, maybe database management, and kind of have circle that way we can keep ourselves engaged as well as grow skill-wise, instead of only thinking about going upwards.
Yes, absolutely. It's kind of related. One of the things we're doing, so CARC, the Campus Research Computing Consortium, which is open to anybody dumb enough to volunteer. So the career paths issue is super important, right? For a lot of reasons that I'm not going to go on and on about, probably. But like one of the issues comes up a lot is if you love being the technical person and you're like, you know, trying to moving up in your career and getting raises and, you know, doing more stuff and having more responsibility, but like, you know, you don't want to ever be a manager, right? There's a lot, anybody in this room, like, I want to keep doing the stuff. I don't want to be a manager. And traditionally, that's been limited, right? The only way you get promoted is to become the manager person. And so one of the things we're doing in the career tracks that we're drafting for community feedback is to separate that out, right? And they're doing this a lot in a lot of the tech fields where it's actually okay if you as the engineering type person make more than your manager. So that's an interesting thing to think about because, you know, the manager role is a role. There's no reason for, you know, to think, I mean, our culture thinks that, but there's no real reason to think that that is, you know, should be a higher salary than, you know, a 10-star engineer or whatever. So we're trying to think of it with, you know, bringing the traditional HR so that it fits in to our structures, but also to take into account how much different technology is than anything that's ever happened before.
I have one more thing. This comes from the education. When I started HPC, one thing I always felt that every time I went to PI or grad student, there's times spent emotionally I was a little depressed. They have more knowledge than we do. And I don't know what they talk about. A lot of times they are looking up. How we can educate ourselves? And I feel like there are only certain part of fields in there. Physics, chemistry, bioinformatics, and all those. How do we educate ourselves so we could have some respect? I'm just honest. I don't know what about other people.
So how do you educate yourself
To have respect.
to have respect?
So I don't think that's where the respect comes from. And the fact that they're explaining things to you in a way that you don't understand means they assume you do understand it. The difficulty is they're not good at articulating what they do in a way that someone outside of their very small sub-discipline could understand. And the reason they're not good at it is they have very little practice at it. They don't talk about their research to people who are in a completely different discipline. They may have good friendships with those people. They may have good colleague relationships with those people, but they don't talk about their research with those people. So you don't have to be an expert in their area, and quite frankly, it's a fool's errand to try because there are 400 different research areas at your institution that you would need to become an expert in. That is not realistic. You need to become an expert in listening to them talk about it and then figuring out what they really need. Understanding the actual science, you're welcome to do it, but it's outside the scope of what you need to do to be effective. Go ahead.
So is anybody here familiar with the concept of imposter syndrome? Yeah? Get over it. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, and so
It's about you. It's not about what everybody else thinks.
yeah, I'm always having imposter syndrome, actually, and I'm going to plug Cyber Ambassadors because I can.
What is that again?
Yeah, but we had a module that we did last year called I don't know if we did it, Complex Conversations. And the whole point of the module is how do you talk to someone when your vocabulary and experience are completely different than the other person's vocabulary and experience. And there are tricks you can use, like paraphrasing and stuff. You don't have to be an expert, but you can work with them in a good conversation to come to an understanding of what needs to happen. And there are skills you can learn to do that, but it's not that you have to be an expert at everything. I agree with Henry. Yeah, there's no way I'm an expert at everything, but yet I usually feel I'm respected when I walk in the room and have my small area of expertise.
It's easy in academia when you're surrounded by people who are, or at least think they are, way smarter than everybody else in the entire universe, you know? And this isn't just academia, it's everywhere. There's egos galore. And so it's very, very easy to feel inferior. And I think, so one of the things you have to do is build up confidence in what you are good at and believe that and feel comfortable with the things you don't know, right? It's okay to not know things, and you can stand up proud about what you know, and you can be authentic about that. And you know, I think kind of my evolution of going through all of these things and finally getting to a point that's like, I'm pretty proud of the work I do, right? And I don't know everything by far, especially jumping into networking, and I only learned how to spell TCP last year.
You introduced TCP.
I did. I know, I got to introduce Bent Surf, so yeah, that gives me some credibility.
I was on a phone call today on plasma physics. I was saying, hey, Dirk, could you come to this meeting on plasma physics? We're doing multidimensional plasma physics, and we need your HPC expert in the group. Right, and I'm like, I actually don't know what the word, I mean, I've heard of plasma, but it was on MASH. I'm pretty sure that's a different plasma. I also know if you put two grapes next to each other in the microwave,
oh yeah, that's so
plasma
cool.
appears. But I really kind of sort of only know very mild things about it. So I had to go to this meeting about plasma, and they're talking about dust plasmas and microplasma. I don't know what they were talking about. And I had to sit there and I'm listening and I'm like, I'm here for them, but I'm not sure why I'm here. So I had to sit and listen. And I said, I didn't understand that. Where do you need my help? Right? And then the organizer basically said, oh, we'll come to you. We just haven't gotten there yet. And I'm like, okay, do I need to understand this? And he goes, no, let's move on. But we're good friends. And he knew that I didn't know anything about plasma physics. It's not the thing that comes out of your blood, though, right? That's a different type of plasma. Okay.
But that's, I have at least 20 stories exactly the same way. Mostly they want you there for moral support in the beginning, and then when you get down to the computational aspects, they will sit down and talk to you. And like I've sat there and I was like, what's your workflow? And then they talk for 20 or 30 minutes in all sorts of words I don't understand, but occasionally I pick up on a keyword like compute. And so then I relate back to them, and I just tell them, you know, this sounds super cool. Let me see if I understand what you're using with the computational aspects are. And I tell them back what I heard on the pieces that involve technology. And then we iterate until we both share a picture of what language I speak and what language they speak. And we kind of know what the plan is.
Yeah, in this talk, they were saying the word machine learning like 1,000,000 times. And I finally had to stop them a little bit and say, look, it sounds like there's no one in here besides me that knows, has ever done any machine learning. They were seeing it as this magical tool that they were going to throw at every piece of the problem.
It is.
And I said that this is great, but we need to really dig into those if you're planning to use it to solve all your problems. It's not a panacea. And that's where my expertise came in. Like I was able to say something. I didn't understand what you were doing, and maybe it's perfectly appropriate to use machine learning in every single context they yelled out. I just made me nervous, and that was my expertise, and I had to voice that, and I think they found that valuable, even though I told them I don't understand what a plasma is.
Well, joke that researchers and sysadmins need a translator, and perfect.
That's what the research, this interface role is.
So just to add on to Dirk and what Dylan was saying, I like to think of it like a Venn diagram where you have a circle of biologists and a circle of sysadmins and computational. And there's no overlap, but then there's a third circle that's us, which slowly overlaps a little with biologists and a little with sysadmins, and then that's how they get the connection.
Lovely.
Smiley face.
Yes, the smiley face. Dirk stories.
Story time with Dirk.
So one more thing, I don't know if you related. You really made a mistake. It's your fault. How do you get over it?
Oh, if I make the mistake.
Yes. It's
Oh,
my
I've
fault.
done that.
It's my fault.
Uh,
I messed up the
Oh.
PI, messed up there something. How
You
do you
want-
get over that?
Just acknowledge,
Okay.
just like take
Okay.
that responsibility.
Because
Can-
it's made
can
me
you-
depressed for months.
So
Can I-
can you fix it, number one? Or is it like, is it something you can fix? Because that makes a difference. Like you can fix it, say, I'm sorry I messed that up, but here's the solution. If it's something that is broken
Deleted file.
and gone,
Apologize.
you grovel.
Yeah.
And then you have to forgive yourself too, which is often harder.
And then you say, I am extremely sorry. What can I do to make this better?
Right. And usually there is something you can do to make it better. And if you do exactly that, you say, I'm sorry that I screwed this up. What can I do to make it better? And they tell you and you do it, now they forgive you. In my experience, what they're mad about is that you screwed it up and then you walked away.
Yeah.
And if you let yourself wallow in your unhappiness with yourself, and as a result of that, you're not immediately resolving the issue for them, then they will actually legitimately hate you. But if you instead offer to take action, and that you can, and there's some action you can take that will help, they forgive you. People are actually pretty forgiving in most instances if you help fix the problem. But if they believe you abandoned them after causing the problem, they will never forgive, they will never forget, and they will pour poison about you in everyone else's ear.
Debbie.
Trust is a real important part of a relationship. You cannot have a relationship without trust. And if they can't trust you to tell them the truth, they're not going to trust you about anything. You've just broken that relationship, and until you admit to it, there's nothing you can do to fix that relationship.
I teach my kids how to apologize, right? You don't just say you're sorry. I say, no. You needed a sincere apology. What did you do wrong? How are you going to do to fix it? And what are you doing to prevent it from happening again in the future? That's your apology. I teach that to my kids, and I learned I actually had to teach it to some of my employees as well.
On my first day of this job, my boss told me that if you ever screw up, and you will, I want to hear about it first from you before anyone else, and then we will come up with a solution. And I guess at that point we were talking about like user state and all of this. So you need to have your management and your boss also.
Oh yes. You don't want your boss to be surprised about a mistake you made.
Right? Never surprise the boss.
Oh, and I have a pet peeve from a user point of view. So someone says, hey, I have this problem, and they send in an email or a ticket or whatever, and I had a sysadmin who would send back an email, it's fixed, try again. Stop doing that, right? What was broken? And he would say, oh, they want to understand.
Yeah.
No, but give some context, even if they don't understand. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. Here's what was broken. Here's how we fixed it. And here's the script we're putting in place in our system so that it won't happen again. That's a real response.
Mm-hmm.
And please let us know if you ever see this problem again. I mean.
Well, and in fact, one I like to add is, can you test it and let us know?
Oh, that's a good one.
Because if you claim that it works and then they write back and say, no, it doesn't, now they think you're either incompetent or lazy or don't care.
Yeah. Well,
But if you say, can you test it, then you're having them collaborate with you on resolving the problem.
And acknowledging that they're the expert in that particular bug.
And that it may still be broken. You're not pretending that you are a genius who is perfect and always fixes every problem.
exactly. That's so important.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in giving them a little bit too much information. At least, especially when there's a problem. They might not understand it, but there's a context there.
I would lead that email. Can you test to see if it works now?
And then here's what I
and
did.
then the other stuff, so they don't have to read 14
Yeah,
pages.
always. We didn't do the email thing.
Don't
Always
bury the
start with
lead.
the ask.
Yeah, don't bury the lead.
So I'm going to piggyback on that. One more question. At my institutions, previous admin left, and he was the HPC guy for 20 years. departmental IT, and we're the part of the central IT. So when he left, it was a blessing, also was a curse. Blessing was, okay, we got it. So we all jumped, and I was one of them because I was one of the few. To different PI to place them, working day and night and over the weekend. And many times I didn't even wait for the email to go to my directors. And they said, do this, do that. I was trying to win their heart to get back to the IT department under the HPC research committee. So one professor, they are not in a condo. More. This is all free within the free services. The dean hasn't even assigned anybody yet. So it doesn't matter during my religious festival day, the weekend, whatever, I was always there. Like many of us there, we didn't have any other things to do. One time he needed to do something, go on a conference somewhere, said, "What are you when I need you the most?" I'm working slave. So there are times, 99% of the time you do a good job and nothing happened, and you thought you had the good relations, everything was going good, happy communication. One last time you never expected that for a small thing will get you. So you'll send it to the dean. All this time you have done things, it didn't even go to your direct manager.
Yeah, that's true.
So Henry has good, he helped me compose a response when it was like, why we can't help you 24/7, right? And it had some diplomatic words about, our staffing, our budget allows staff for this much time, and if you're interested, it's the yes, if, right? We'd be happy to service 24/7 if we had funding for this many more staff and all of that.
Right, so if you can provide that funding. This actually came up here in the context of an outside third party that was paying for services. And they said, so can we have 24/7 coverage? So I went to every member of the systems facing team and said, if we were to have 2 of you at a time carry a beeper, I mean, obviously it's not literally a beeper anymore, but a beeper, and you were on, like, you're not on duty during the off time, but you're on beeper duty during the off time. And if you're in the middle of, you're at the movie theater with your kid, you're watching a movie, and in the middle of the movie, the beeper goes off, you gotta leave the movie, right? What would that cost? How much percent raise would you need in order to agree to that? And the consensus answer worked out to be about 35%. They were willing to be on the beeper and have shifts, but always have 2 people on the beeper during the 128 hours of non-business hours per week in exchange for an extra 35%. So then I added that up over that many people and what they were being paid and took into account the fringe and all that kind of stuff. And I went back to the company and I said, this is what it would cost. And that was the end of the discussion. So it's perfectly reasonable to say we cannot afford to provide 24/7 coverage. We cannot afford to increase our staff by the number of FTE it will take to provide what it is you're asking us to provide. If you want to help us get that funding, then we would be happy to provide that service.
That was the manager's reply.
Right.
The manager that we handled. They composed the email, still have here. I'm here from the university managing 400 people. I'm the editor-in-chief for this one. I need to have this text editor so I can convert this into PDF. Whenever you want to do Sunday, 4:30.
They were asking you for the text editor?
No, they want to convert the paper into some kind
No,
of.
no, I understand that, but was your area of responsibility research computing or some other thing?
The research computing, but they send the Sunday evening.
No, I get it, but that's outside, that's entirely, not like slightly.
Yeah, right back, say, that's not my job.
Well, no, the correct answer is, I will help you find the person who is responsible for that. Because we get those questions a lot because our support address is support@oscar.ou.edu, so we get questions about what are the library hours or whatever, and so we redirect them to help.ou.edu.
No, he wanted to install a package, so he could convert his.
On the supercomputer.
Yeah, into.
It's very fair to say that's not a service that we provide.
Yeah. Well, it's on Sunday, and they are not the
I
free
get it.
users.
You can't please everyone, too.
Right.
But it is, I really like the yes, if statement. I think that's a very powerful statement. And then I could have done that if, you gave me enough money.
Don't burn yourself to keep everybody else warm.
Ooh,
Has
fun
anyone
story.
figured that one out?
That's a good.
I find it harder to work with the people I like. My boss comes up with me a cool idea. Hey, can we do this? I'm like, damn it, yes, that sounds awesome. All right, I'll find time to do that too. Yeah.
Yeah, there is like some cloud HPC talk. I think that's interesting too.
Will the cloud HPC talk next year?
Yes.
Email writing's good.
So we've got the stories from the trenches coming up after the break, and
Yes.
that's the catch-all. So some of this stuff we can do during the stories from the trenches. I'm happy to talk about those emails. I literally learned tricks this week. So,
Oh, I want to hear.
yeah,
I gotta leave.
I know. Oh, here.
Can you get
Oh, the recording. The recording.
Oh, we can zoom in.
On the.
Yeah, while you're in the car. Not on the plane, probably. They try not streaming.
Well, you can do audio. You
I
can-
already learned one from sending the flights.
Oh, yeah.
Back to back.
That's how they used to do it in commercials. Back in the olden days, we used to watch commercials, and it would stop in between a show. Yeah, as you're watching it, these little mini YouTube videos would pop up, which were commercials for company. Oh, you're all old enough to remember. But they would do one commercial, and then they would do a different commercial, and then they do the exact same commercial right again, just to get your memory. I feel like that when Henry sends emails.
I always figured they did that just because they couldn't figure out what commercial they'd done last.
Oh, somebody wants more cake pops.
There were actually.
Only one day per week. Actually, that came out several times. Multiple people want more cake pops.
Some people.
Well, I will tell you, and I know you're all gonna be angry, but I got tired of carrying home old chocolate cakes. So I canceled the chocolate cake this year, so there will be no chocolate cake during the break today. So, sorry to say, but I was tired of paying for chocolate cake and then having my kids eat it.
So, just to close out,
You're so mean to your kids.
a few minutes left. Now, Dane and I were trying to debate how to come up with this discussion. What was your feedback? Was it okay? I feel like we might have stepped on Henry's toes a little with the
Oh, you
stories.
totally wrecked my session.
Oh, I thought that was the point.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that. I'm sorry. That was Dana's point.
well. Oh, okay.
You like the polling?
I like how it adds to the discussion without us having to repeat everything.
Plus 20.
So Henry, where are we at in this ACI after your grant exit? Certain years or how many years?
So the original grant funding expired 2015, I think. So we did 3 years on the original grant funding, and then it expired. Since then, we've been using my travel budget from the Exceed grant. But so that's worked out great.
This is technically now sponsored, it's an Exceed project.
Right. So that was, we started that last year, we're doing it this year, and then we have 2 more years of that. So through 2021, which means we need to make sure in 2021 we do June instead of August. Next year won't matter. And then I have no idea, but quite frankly, even knowing what's going to happen this year and then 2 more years is already a miracle.
No, we just have to finish getting everybody up to speed on all this by then.
Oh, yeah, that's the easy
We'll be
part.
done with research computing.
Yeah. We're gonna move on to totally different things.
Because it has to be novel and innovative.
That's right. There's no money for doing the same thing right.
So in your grant, can you join other universities and make them go away on it?
What do you mean?
Like other universities, collaborate with you?
Are they allowed to put money in? Sure. Are you volunteering?
No, I mean, when you write the grant and
Well, we did. So the proposal that's currently under review at the NSF, which is to create a certification program for research computing facilitators, that would give us $300K, including a significant amount of money for continuing these workshops. $300K over a 2-year period. If that were to go well, if it gets funded and goes well, we would be applying for a follow-on grant. So this was a pilot grant, we go for an implementation grant, That would be 500K over an additional 3 years. So we could, in theory, have another 5 years worth of funding on this to develop out the certification program. But of course, there's zero guarantee we'll get any money at all. So we could get nothing. Repeatedly. Like we got nothing last year. They declined our proposal. In fact, they were a little bit cruel about it.
You're ending our session
On such a low note? No, because all the happy stuff will come in the next session. So you need to stay on the line so that we can talk about the exciting fun stuff. What time is it now?
Well, it's actually time for Dirk and I to go. Bye, Zoom.
Oh, all right, I'll turn off the recording. Bye.